So I just got done doing a 1 hour YouTube live stream over on the Fight Game Media channel about this, but I got to give my thoughts on this over here on World of Geekdom, and that is the big news that came out today. Raw, WWE Raw, which had been rumored to go to a number of different stations starting in 2025. Amazon Prime was rumored to pick up Raw since they have the NFL on Thursdays and they want to expand their sports package, and they're looking to do that. Also, there was a big rumor about Raw maybe ending up on Warner Brothers Discovery channels like TNT and TBS, which would cause a real big term of confusion amongst where AEW ends up with all that. Well, it's neither one. Raw is going to Netflix starting January 2025. Netflix is now moving beyond just doing movies and documentaries and having their own series and streaming just video on demand content. Now Netflix is stepping into live content. From what we understand, Raw will continue to be airing live on USA Network for the rest of the year. And then January of next year, Raw will be moving to Netflix. Now, this comes off of an announcement that came out earlier today where it was made official. Netflix is paying them a $5 billion deal, which is $500 million for 10 years, 5 years minimum. And then they have an option to extend it for another 5 years or maybe even go another 10 years at the end of that. So Raw could be on Netflix for the next 10 years. Now, why Netflix? Well, even though Netflix is probably the streaming service I watch least right now, only because I tend to focus most of my Netflix time on documentaries and I see those once in a while. Netflix is the OG of streaming services as far as like a streaming platform goes. Before Amazon Prime, before Disney Plus, before Peacock, before Paramount Plus, there was Netflix. They experimented first, and they were the first ones to really knock it out of the park. Well, because of that, Netflix has a much larger international distribution, meaning that people outside the US, more people have access to Netflix and are subscribers around the world than any other streaming service, including Disney Plus. Netflix just got a huge head start on everybody else. So Raw will be moving to Netflix. We are unsure if it'll be 2 hours or 3 hours. I guess it'll be up to them. They'll be the ones to make that decision. But the deal is in place. It was announced today, as well as a new member to the TKO board of directors, and that is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. So there was a video out there from CNBC of Ari Emanuel, the CEO of TKO, which is the parent company of WWE and UFC, and The Rock is now one of the board members of TKO. This is a huge thing for The Rock personally and professionally, because not only is he now involved with a big company and is that big company is now working with Netflix, but also he can now license The Rock name out, for a lot more money, which he did. But the big story to me is not necessarily just that. The big story to me is the fact that Raw is moving to Netflix. Netflix having the most eyeballs is a big reason as to why they also went with WWE and that deal was made. But also understand this, Netflix, I think, is just beginning to dip their toes into live. I do think that down the road, as the cable and network television days start to leave us as a society and we get into more streaming services, I do feel that at some point we will get other sports on Netflix. I think WWE is only just the beginning. I think having the NFL on Amazon Prime is also just the early sort of cultural change going on, because down the road, I think that we will see more NFL games, NBA games, Major League Baseball, other sports, NASCAR maybe even. Down the road, little by little, put some of their games or their races, maybe the NHL, on streaming platforms. And Netflix having all those international viewers is a big deal. Now, depending on where you live, will depend on what you're going to get. Because if you are an international Netflix subscriber, if you live outside the US, from what I understand, the deal will not only include Raw, but it's going to also include SmackDown, NXT, and the PLEs. So if you live in the United States, SmackDown will be on USA, NXT will be on CW, Raw will be on Netflix, and the PLEs and the documentaries will be on Peacock. That's the way the deal's made, at least for now. But internationally, everything goes to Netflix. That is kind of a big deal. Netflix, the OGs of streaming, picking up WWE. Now, how will this affect AEW? Well, first of all, AEW no longer has to worry about Raw or, any WWE programming on Warner Brothers Discovery Network. So we're not going to see Raw on TNT or TBS. So Tony Khan and the rest of the AEW corporate people and even the fans can breathe a sigh of relief because they're not going to have to worry about that. However, there's a big deal coming up with Warner Brothers Discovery and NBA, and that could affect how much AEW will make in the renewed TV deal, because the difference between AEW now and AEW in 2019 when the deal was first made with Warner Brothers is that the original executive was friends with Tony Khan. He's not there anymore. And the ratings for AEW in 2023 were lower than what they were during the height of AEW in 2021. But they're not so low that they've completely collapsed. However, we don't know what Warner Brothers executives actually think about that. But the other thing that should be a factor in that is that AEW has a much bigger production package, because when AEW first started, it was just Dynamite. Then it became Dynamite, Rampage, and Battle of the Belts. Those specials. Now it's 5 hours a week, every week, plus Battle of the Belts whenever they do those, every quarter or whatever. And that, of course, adds in Collision. So there's a lot more hours of programming that AEW can sell to Warner Brothers. So it's good news for AEW. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be making a ton more on their renewal. There's been speculation they're probably going to get a boost. That's probably going to happen just because there's more content out there. But how much of a boost remains to be seen. Either way, it's not like this decision affects AEW that much as far as how much of a boost they're going to get. It really does seem to be mostly a situation involving NBA and Warner Brothers, and WWE's thing is kind of separate. But it does show that streaming networks are definitely going to be much more in line for content, not just wrestling shows and other sports events, but also live events like concerts are going to end up going up for bid at some point. We could also see live specials. Obviously, you know that they have a lot of those Netflix specials with like Dave Chappelle, like things like that. Those aren't going to go away. This is just another layer of content, of programming that Netflix can now fight for with other streaming platforms. So as the years go by, we witness the decline of cable and of network television and the increase of streaming. This is just another piece of the pie, another brick to stack on top of that. Cable's not entirely dead yet. I know to some of you guys it is, and I get it. To me it is too. I haven't actually had cable TV in a long time. But we're just getting closer to the eventuality when eventually nobody has cable TV. And we're not there yet, but that will happen at some point. So it's just another progression towards that. Interesting story today, big story for sure. Live Raw on Netflix starting January of next year.